So the reason I want to go sideline first is because I want to be able to play around with her shoulder blade and see what kind of range of motion she has kind of passively before I have her do a bunch of active tests. I'll get in here around people's shoulder blades and I'll try to find the borders, and I'll put my thumb and index finger webbing space in their inferior angle. For this passive test, I like to be able to really be able to move their shoulder blade around. When they're lying on their back, it's really hard to see if their shoulder blade's moving because they're laying on it. So here I take the web spacing between my thumb and my index finger, and I try to sort of find the borders of their shoulder blade, which on her, oh, no wonder you're tender down there. It's like glued to her rib cage. So there's not a whole lot of space. So I want to see what her range of motion is coming into protraction and retraction, and she's missing some retraction, especially down at that inferior angle. Protraction is pretty good, actually. I didn't do an observation on her. She was not my subject for that, but I have a feeling she probably rests in upward rotation or protraction. I just dropped her humerus because it was trying to do too much of the job here. And I like to have a finger sometimes on the clavicle too, so I can feel all the motion. So I'll come up into elevation, and I do feel the clavicle rotate and drop down, which is cool. And she seems to have the motion down here, maybe a little stiff. I'd probably like it to feel a little freer on the way up. And then downward rotation, that's where the inferior angle. The cool thing is just doing this, I'm mobilizing her and she's getting more range of motion. The other way I can check downward rotation, which is basically checking the length of the serratus anterior. So because the serratus anterior has extensions onto the ribs, so if I really want to maximize that length of it, I can open here in in side bending, and then I can bring it back and see what we got in external or downward rotation. And it still feels like that inferior angle. She's getting it everywhere but that inferior angle. It's a little restricted, which again makes sense because when I palpated in there, she's like, oh, that's tender. Now I want to see how she does. So I'm just going to say, can you take your arm forward towards the MovementREV there, and can you slide it forward and then bring it back? Yeah, and then forward and back. And we're seeing exactly what I felt. Is she does pretty good, except her inferior angle gets a little stuck. I can go in front and we can test upward rotation. Let's see you go into upward rotation and sideline. So start here, straight arm, and then just come all the way up. And so her scapula moves pretty late. Okay, come back. Go again. Yeah, it's like her arm's pulling her scapula instead of her scapula pushing her arm. And that's a pretty normal pattern I see with a dysfunctional shoulder. Take it off. Oh, yeah. I got a show.